here in the old railroad room, 15 Jarrett Farm Road, and we're holding a picture of our old kinfolks. We loved them, and we kind of partial in our hearts, and like to see them preserved. And I'm putting my thumb on my grandfather, my mother's father, Dave Freeman. He could not read and write, but he could look at 50 head of steers and tell you within $1,000 what they would bring. Had a large family, and they sent all of his children back to the Presbyterians. Had a boarding school in Hot Springs, Dornbell Boarding School, and he sent all his children down to Dornbell Boarding School, and that's where my mother went to school and where she dated my father. And he'd ride the train down to from Marshall to Hot Springs to court Mama Linda, and then when the railroads lost the mail business in the 60s and took the passenger trains off, they no longer needed the old depot. And she's the lady that called me in my office in Atlanta and said, Forrest, they're going to tear the old Marshall Depot down. Said, we don't want that. No, ma'am, we do not want that. Said, that's where your father caught the train to come to see me. Yes, ma'am. So Harold Hall, being a good friend, president of Southern Railroad, somebody made a phone call, and this happened that they leased this old Marshall Depot to the city of Marshall for $1 a year, and then we got a community grant and put a stage and a kitchen and a sound system and chairs and every Friday night, well, until the virus came along with picking and singing and clogging and cakewalking. And one of the last things, Mother Linda lived to be 95 in 3 months, and one of the last things she said, Forrest, yes ma'am, promise me you'll keep the depot going. So we're trying to keep our promise. The next picture is Miss Zadie Ponder, and Zadie was born on this old farm, and Zadie and Laura, my grandmother Ponder Jarrett, were brothers and sisters. And Zadie is the one the jail's named after, and we're glad to see that Zadie is going to go back home and be in the jail. The next gentleman, I am told, is Wheat McClure, and Wheat McClure was a cattle buyer, I believe, for the state of North Carolina. And the next gentleman is Willis Payne, and he lived on Little Pine, and he was the brother of my grandmother Freeman, who was Grandpa Freeman's wife. And Willis was not known to be very ambitious, and back in those days, all the farmers would get together and the thrashers would come by and thrash the wheat. Well, Willis, he crawled up under the sled and went to sleep while they were thrashing. Uncle Tom Ramsey had a peg leg. He jumped up on the sled, jumped up and down, thump, 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 hollering, hollering. They're running away, the mules run away. And Willis thought they'd put a team of mules to the sled. He jumped up, straight up, and knocked the planks off the sled. And Willis would go see his sister and Dave. He'd go see Dave Freeman for Christmas. And I know one time, right after Ellie and I got married, we went over to see Grandpa, and Willis had just left, and we asked Grandpa Freeman, how was your Christmas? And he said, we had some awful bad luck with some of the Christmas. Him and Willis had got gaily and frolicking around, and Sally, Grandmother Freeman, had poured out their wine. And Willis said, well, if that's the way you're going to treat me, I'm going to get on my little mule and go back to Little Pine. And so Willis went back to Little Pine. So that's the story of this picture, and we hope y'all enjoy it.
Yeah, and then of course EY's in there.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. EY was here, and everybody knew EY.
Right, and EY's your first cousin.
EY was my first cousin, and he done a lot of good. He done a lot of good, and I've got the swap out ballot box where in '64 the Democrat Party in Madison County voted more people than were registered Republicans and Democrats, and EY said they, and of course the FBI made an investigation, didn't amount to much. And EY said they got overzealous, said the Democrats got a little bit overzealous, and that's my story on EY.
All right, thank you, Mr. Forrest Jarrett, for all your time.